Welcome, curious minds, to Medium Rare, the show where we take a deep dive into the fascinating, often mysterious world of the spiritual and the psychic.
We really explore those topics that intrigue us all. It doesn't matter if you're a firm believer, a complete skeptic, or maybe just, really curious.
And today, our mission is to peel back the layers on something truly groundbreaking. We're looking at the surprising convergence of cutting-edge science and, well, ancient spiritual wisdom.
Especially when it comes to understanding psychic abilities.
Exactly. It's a space where phenomena that are often dismissed, as impossible or just anecdotal, are now finding kind of rigorous footing in laboratory evidence.
Yeah, we're going to explore whether these seemingly extraordinary feats, things like being able to perceive what's happening thousands of miles away, or maybe even influencing someone's well-being with just a thought,
Right.
are actually a fundamental sort of inherent aspect of human potential rather than just like isolated anomalies.
And for this deep dive, we've been supplied with an incredible body of work. It comes from a truly unique duo. Russell Targ, who is a renowned physicist, and Jane Katra, a health education doctor and spiritual healer.
They've dedicated decades, literally decades, to researching phenomena like remote viewing and distant healing.
So prepare for some serious aha moments, because here's where it gets, well, really interesting.
Okay, so let's start by introducing this unlikely but incredibly insightful pair.
Yeah, they're quite the team.
On one side, we have Russell Targ. Now, he's not just any physicist. He's a co-founder of the Stanford Research Institute's investigation into psychic abilities, a prolific author, a genuine pioneer in extrasensory perception research.
His background is deeply rooted in the measurable, right, the verifiable world of physics.
Yeah.
Lasers, that sort of thing.
Precisely. And then we have Jane Katra. She holds a doctorate in health education and works as a spiritual healer and an immune system coach.
It's quite a combination, isn't it?
Yeah.
A scientist, deeply immersed in the physical world, and a healer attuned to the subtle energies of consciousness.
It really is. It's a testament, I think, to their open-mindedness and their shared commitment to exploring the full spectrum of human experience.
And they didn't just come together out of curiosity, did they? They developed this profound hypothesis that bridges these two, well, seemingly disparate worlds.
Their core hypothesis is truly compelling. They basically propose that ancient spiritual paths, especially those emphasizing quieting the mind,
Meditation, contemplation.
right, those practices often lead to what we commonly refer to as psychic-seeming experiences. Think about the wisdom traditions across the globe: Buddhism, Hinduism, contemplative paths within Christianity, Kabbalistic Judaism, Sufism.
All of them mention something like this.
Many of these traditions, through deep practice, describe practitioners gaining perceptions or abilities that go beyond the ordinary five senses.
And it's not just a passing mention either. I mean, you look at the ancient Hindu master Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras. He explicitly details that on the path to transcendence, one might experience what he calls siddhis. These are abilities like seeing into the distance, perceiving the future, even the capacity to diagnose and cure illnesses.
But here's the crucial part, and Patanjali himself points this out.
Yeah, he warns against them, doesn't he?
He does. He cautions against becoming attached to these abilities, calling them mere phenomena standing as stumbling blocks on the path to enlightenment.
And Targ and Katra, they echo this profound insight. While they acknowledge these psychic abilities are remarkable and scientifically verifiable,
Which is key.
they suggest they are not the ultimate goal. Instead, they're like signposts, or as they put it, an inspiration for an immense and still largely undeveloped human potential.
So these aren't just, parlor tricks or party pieces. They actually reveal a deeper truth about human consciousness.
So it's not about the tricks themselves, but what they reveal about us, about our fundamental nature.
Exactly. And what they reveal at its very heart is this common thread. It weaves through the experiences of spiritual healers, mystics, and now even scientists. It's a connection to an interconnected and non-local mind.
Okay, that's the core idea. Interconnected and non-local mind. Let's unpack that a bit.
Well, what's fascinating is how they articulate the two primary ways this connection shows up.
Okay.
On one side, you have an inflow of information. That's your psychic perception, or clairvoyance, telepathy, maybe precognition, knowing the future.
Receiving information, basically.
Right. And on the other side, there's an outflow of intention. This plays a crucial role in things like distant healing, where one's thoughts or intentions seem to affect another person or even a biological system at a distance.
Sending information or intention.
Precisely. And they propose that both these phenomena, the inflow and the outflow, reside on either side of the quiet mind.
The quiet mind again.
It's within this stillness, this space of non-thought, that self-awareness can arise and these, profound capacities become accessible.
So it's like the quiet mind isn't just about peace or relaxation, although that's great too, but it's like a gateway, a tuning fork that lets us resonate with this larger interconnected consciousness.
That's a great way to put it. And this isn't just like abstract spiritual philosophy. This is precisely where cutting-edge quantum physics starts to echo ancient wisdom in really astonishing ways.
Okay, now you got my attention. Quantum physics and ancient mystics.
Indeed. The concept they highlight is non-locality, or quantum interconnectedness. It's a term popularized by the physicist David Bohm.
Right, Bohm, I've heard of him.
And this isn't just theory, not just chalk on a blackboard. It has been repeatedly and rigorously demonstrated in labs all over the world.
Oh.
Well, imagine tiny packets of energy, like quanta of light photons being created together, like twins. Then they're sent off in opposite directions, maybe many kilometers apart.
Okay.
Astonishingly, they maintain an instantaneous connection. What happens to one photon immediately and simultaneously affects its twin, regardless of the vast distance separating them.
Instantly. But how? What about the speed of light limit?
That's the mind-bending part. There's no signal traveling between them that we can detect. It's immediate. It's as if distance simply doesn't exist for them in that connection.
Wow. Okay, that's hard to grasp.
It really is. Physicist Henry Stapp from the University of California, Berkeley, he's quoted as considering these quantum connections to be the most profound discovery in all of science.
The most profound discovery. That's a huge statement.
It is, because it fundamentally upends our everyday understanding of reality, where we see things as separate, distinct objects interacting across space.
And this scientific concept, this non-locality, it aligns directly with what ancient spiritual teachers were saying.
Directly and powerfully. Think about the sages of India, who for millennia have taught that separation is an illusion.
It's a core tenet in many traditions.
Exactly. So in this light, Targ and Katra present psychic abilities like remote viewing, not as supernatural feats, but as personal experiential demonstrations of this non-local connection within consciousness itself.
So if tiny particles can be linked instantly across space, maybe our minds can too.
That's the implication. If fundamental particles can instantaneously influence each other across vast distances, then perhaps our consciousness, too, is not strictly limited by the space between our ears, or even by physical distance. It suggests, as they say, that there is no distance for consciousness.
Our expanded awareness, it's consistent with living in a non-local world.
That's their argument.
So what does this truly change about how we might perceive our daily lives? If there's genuinely no distance for consciousness, what does that fundamentally shift about how we perceive our interactions with others, especially people far away?
Well, it suggests a profound interconnectedness, doesn't it? Not just as a nice philosophical idea, but as a potentially verifiable aspect of reality. If everything is truly tangled up at the quantum level, why wouldn't our consciousness also be part of that same non-local web?
It's almost like science is finally catching up, providing a framework for what mystics have intuited for ages. This idea alone is enough to make you pause and really rethink your entire worldview.
Definitely.
Now let's peel back the curtain on one of the most astonishing areas of this research. Remote viewing. This isn't just some new age idea, is it? It has a surprisingly rigorous and even top secret history.
Oh, absolutely not just New Age. The story of the Stanford Research Institute, SRI, is fascinating. This investigation into psychic abilities, specifically remote viewing, began way back in 1972. And Russell Targ was a co-founder of this, initially, very secret program.
Secrets? How secret?
Top secret. And here's where it gets really captivating. For 2 decades, from the early 70s into the mid-90s, this research was explicitly supported by the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, and other government agencies.
The CIA funded psychic research during the Cold War.
During the height of the Cold War, their task was clear: understand psychic abilities and, crucially, use them to gather intelligence on the Soviet Union.
So we're literally talking about psychic skies, funded by the government, trying to get intel on the Soviets. That sounds like a movie plot.
It really does. It's incredible to think that an agency like the CIA would pour resources into something so seemingly, well, fantastical.
So what exactly is remote viewing? according to Targ and Katra. And what did SRI discover about how reliable it was?
Okay, so remote viewing, as they define it, is the human mind's capacity for expanded awareness. It allows individuals to envision distant places, even future events or activities.
See things far away or things yet to happen.
Exactly. And what they found, maybe surprisingly, was how easily people could learn to do it. It wasn't reserved for just a select few with innate gifts. Ordinary people could be trained to incorporate this direct knowing of the world into their lives.
Okay, that's interesting. It's trainable.
And here's the really counterintuitive part, echoing that non-locality idea. The accuracy and the resolution, the detail of these perceptions, were not sensitive to distance.
Wait, really? It didn't matter if the target was across the street or across the planet?
Apparently not. Whether it was a few miles away across the country or thousands of miles away on another continent, the clarity of the psychic perception remained pretty consistent.
It completely defies our physical intuition about how information travels. What about accuracy? Were people just guessing vaguely?
Not at all. The reliability rates they achieved were quite striking, way beyond what you'd expect by chance. In some series, they recorded accuracy as high as 80%.
80%, that's huge.
It is. The authors themselves, Targ and Katra, highlight an impressive personal record in one series, 11 hits out of 12 trials.
Wow, okay. What kind of information came through most clearly? Was it like seeing a photograph?
Viewers were most consistent and accurate at describing fundamental things: shape, form, color, visual basics.
Okay.
Analytical information like names or the function of an object or specific identities that was less consistently accurate. It was harder to get right.
More like impressions than labels.
Kind of. But beyond just visuals, skilled viewers could sometimes describe associated feelings, sounds, smells, even electrical or magnetic fields coming from the target.
Really? That detailed?
Yeah. With practice, participants got better at separating the genuine psychic signal, that pure, non-local information, from the mental noise of their own memories, thoughts, or imagination. They could apparently even sense target details as small as 1 millimeter.
1 millimeter? That's incredible precision. The case studies must be amazing. Tell us about Pat Price and that famous gantry crane. This is one of the stories that apparently really grabbed the intelligence community.
Oh, the Pat Price case is, without doubt, one of the most compelling and consequential. It was 1974, part of a demonstration for the CIA. Pat Price, who was a retired police commissioner, interestingly, and one of SRI's best remote viewers, he was given only geographical coordinates. Latitude and longitude. That's it.
Just numbers on a map.
Just numbers. And with only that, he described in astonishing detail the inside and the outside of a secret Soviet weapons laboratory way out in Siberia. He produced a detailed sketch illustrating his mental impressions, and it famously depicted this giant gantry crane rolling back and forth over a building at the target site.
A specific large piece of equipment.
Very specific. And the kicker, the detail that apparently sent shockwaves through the intelligence community, was the remarkable similarity between Price's sketch and later CIA satellite photography of the very same site. For instance, both his sketch and the photos showed the crane having exactly 8 wheels.
8 wheels. That specific. It wasn't just a lucky guess then.
Not likely. It was an incredibly specific, accurate depiction of classified information inside a highly sensitive Soviet military installation from just coordinates.
What happened then? Did the CIA freak out?
Well, this stunning success actually triggered a formal congressional investigation into the SRI program. Congress wanted to know if there had been a breach in national security. Like, how did he know this?
They thought maybe he had a spy leak it to him.
Exactly. But of course, no such breach was ever found. And rather than shutting it down, SRI's program actually continued with government support for another 15 years.
That speaks volumes, doesn't it, if they kept funding it after investigating it?
It really does. It suggests they saw real utility, real demonstrated accuracy, even within that highly skeptical, security-conscious environment.
It forced them to take it seriously. And didn't Russell Targ himself have a go at it spontaneously once?
Yes, there's a great anecdote from the early days. Pat Price was unexpectedly absent for a scheduled experiment. So, kind of in the spirit of "the show must go on," Russell Targ, who until then had mostly been an interviewer and facilitator.
The scientist running the experiment.
Right. He spontaneously decided to try remote viewing himself. He was trying to describe the daily activities of his colleague, Hal Puthoff, who was traveling through Colombia at that very moment.
Did he know where Puthoff was going?
No clues whatsoever. No phone call, no travel itinerary. Targ just closed his eyes and immediately got an image of an island airport.
Was it right?
The sketch he drew was surprisingly accurate. It even showed ocean at the end of a runway, which turned out to be exactly where Puthoff was.
Wow. From the facilitator himself.
Targ later concluded from this, with a bit of self-deprecating humor, I think, that even a scientist can be psychic when the necessity level is high enough.
Which I imagine, under CIA scrutiny, was pretty high. And these abilities weren't just limited to the U.S. looking at the USSR, right?
Not at all. In 1984, Targ organized a pair of highly successful, long-distance remote viewing experiments. 10,000 miles between Moscow and San Francisco.
10,000 miles. Who was involved?
The famed Russian healer Juna Dabatashvili. Her task was to describe a hidden location in San Francisco where Targ's colleague would be hiding.
Okay, but what's extra amazing about that?
What's truly astonishing is that she had to focus her attention 10,000 miles to the west and 2 hours into the future to describe his location correctly.
2 hours into the future, so precognitive remote viewing.
Seems like it. And these experiments were done under the strict control of the USSR Academy of Sciences, adding another layer of scientific rigor and official oversight.
So we're not just talking about perceiving distant locations, but future locations too.
Yeah.
That pushes the boundaries even further, challenging our ideas about space and time.
Absolutely. And what's crucial for listeners to understand is that this wasn't just a few isolated instances or lucky breaks. The data from SRI's formal controlled investigations were highly statistically significant.
Meaning it wasn't just chance.
Far from it. The probability of these results happening by random chance was thousands of times smaller than you'd expect. And importantly, they got published.
Where? In psychic magazines?
No, in some of the world's most prestigious mainstream scientific journals. We're talking Nature, Proceedings of the IE, that's the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, and the Proceedings of the AAAS, American Association for the Advancement of Science.
Okay, that's serious peer review. That lends a lot of credibility.
It's a critical point. These findings weren't hidden away. They met the tough standards of mainstream science, demanding attention, even if the implications were, well, deeply unsettling to the standard scientific worldview.
Targ and Ketra documented all this research in their book, right? Miracles of Mind.
That's the one, Miracles of Mind, exploring non-local consciousness and spiritual healing. It covers those 2 decades of CIA-supported remote viewing research meticulously. This body of work really compels us to reevaluate what we think we know about the human mind and its connection to reality.
Okay, so if remote viewing shows the mind's ability to perceive information from afar, what about its ability to influence things? That brings us to distant mental influence of living systems, or DMILs. That sounds almost too fantastical.
It does sound pretty out there, but the findings here are described by researchers in the field as indisputable.
Indisputable. That's a strong word in science.
It is. But over 30 years of investigations have apparently clearly shown that one person's thoughts can affect the physiological functioning of another distant person.
Affect their body, just by thinking.
That's what the data suggests. Now, the precise causal mechanism isn't fully understood by traditional science, obviously, but the empirical results have profound implications. Think about our capacity to influence others, even at a distance.
Like a mother calming a baby from another room, or feeling someone's mood.
We often take things like that for granted, maybe attribute them just to social cues or empathy. But this research suggests a direct, measurable influence of intention, or even just attention at a distance.
It makes you rethink that old saying, do unto others. If we're connected in this subtle, maybe subconscious way, how did they even test this DM stuff?
Some of the experiments are quite inventive. Psychologist William Broad at the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology and anthropologist Marilyn Schlitz, who was research director at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, they did some really exciting DMILS experiments.
What did they do?
They repeatedly showed that if a sender person simply attended, fully just paid attention to a distant person whose physiological activity was being monitored.
Like their heart rate or something.
Specifically, their autonomic galvanic skin responses. Skin conductance, basically, which reflects nervous system arousal.
Okay.
That sender could influence the distant person's skin response just by paying attention.
So it wasn't even about sending a focused heal them thought, necessarily. Just the act of attention itself.
In many of these experiments, yes. The sender would stare intently at a closed-circuit TV image of the distant participant. And without any explicit mental focusing, just staring during specific 30-second trials, they would still influence the remote person's electrodermal responses compared to control periods when no one was staring.
That's subtle, like a low-level energetic interaction.
Possibly. And here's a really intriguing discovery they made within that.
Yeah.
The most anxious and introverted people being stared at actually had significantly more stress reactions. They showed greater electrodermal responses when the sender was focusing on them.
So introverts felt it more.
Apparently. This finding gives some scientific validation to that common, almost universal human experience of feeling stared at, right? And then you turn around and someone is actually looking at you.
Yeah, that happens.
It suggests that maybe quiet or introverted individuals possess, or perhaps have developed, a heightened sensitivity of consciousness. They might be more attuned to these subtle shifts that others just don't notice.
That's a powerful validation of something we often just dismiss. Makes you wonder about all those times you felt a presence. But okay, it's not just about influencing the present or the distant. The research hints at an influence across time itself. Now we're getting to presentiment and backward causation.
Right. We're all kind of familiar with the idea of premonition, that intuitive feeling something's about to happen, usually something bad.
Like a bad feeling before an accident.
Exactly. Then there's presentiment, which is maybe a more subtle inner sensation, that visceral gut feeling that something strange is about to occur. The classic example they use is you're walking down the street, you feel uneasy, you stop suddenly, and then a flower pot falls right where you would have been standing.
A very useful presentiment. Lucky break or something more.
Well, what's truly incredible is that science has found a way to test this gut feeling in the lab. Dean Radin, a well-known researcher at the Institute of Noetic Studies, has done groundbreaking work here.
How can you test a gut feeling in a lab?
Radin's work demonstrates that when a person is shown a picture that's either frightening or sexually arousing, it produces a significant, measurable physiological change. Blood pressure, heart rate, skin resistance, they all shift. It's a classic stress or orienting response.
Okay, that makes sense. Your body reacts to strong images.
But what Radin showed in meticulously controlled experiments is that this orienting response is also observed in the person's physiology a few seconds before the person actually sees the scary or stimulating picture.
Before. The body reacts before the stimulus arrives. How is that possible?
That's the truly mind-bending part. These strong anticipatory reactions consistently showed up before scenes of violence or sexuality, but they did not show up before neutral images like a picture of a basket or a garden.
It's like the nervous system is getting a sneak preview of what's coming.
That's exactly what it looks like. And the profound implication here is, as Targan Katra put it, your future is affecting your past, which, strongly violates our ordinary understanding of causality.
Violates it completely. Time's supposed to go one way.
Right. It suggests that information from the future regularly filters into our dreams and even into our waking physiological states. Our bodies might be receiving signals from events that haven't physically happened yet.
That challenges our whole linear perception of time.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, remember William Broad, the DeMille's researcher? Yeah. He conjectured that maybe healing intentions could even work by reaching backward in time to affect critical seed moments in an illness's development, like nudging things onto a healthier path way back when the problem started.
Whoa. Healing working backwards in time.
If this holds true, it suggests, as the authors say, we live in a non-local spider web of space and time, where both the future and the past are tugging on the present. It completely redefines our linear view, suggesting time is much more fluid, much more interconnected than we usually imagine.
A non-local spider web of space and time. That's an image that will stick with you. Okay, so from precognition, let's turn to another area where intention seems to cross boundaries. Distant healing.
Right. And throughout human history, healers have been revered figures, haven't they? Across countless cultures, often seen as intermediaries between the physical and spiritual realms.
Absolutely. You think of Egyptian pharaohs using healers, African and Asian and American shamans holding esteemed positions. It's a constant thread.
Even the founders of major world religions, Gautama Buddha, Jesus, the Prophet Muhammad, they were all described as gifted healers, often performing what seemed like miraculous cures.
The earliest Christians were known as a healing community, right?
Yeah.
And even before Jesus, Hebrew prophets like Elijah and Elisha were acknowledged healers. Moses healing people from snake bites.
Exactly. Yet for a long time, especially in Western thought, this idea of mind-to-mind healing was largely ignored, dismissed as superstition or anecdote, really without serious scientific investigation.
Just swept under the rug.
Pretty much. But now, as our understanding of consciousness and interconnectedness grows, science is actually realizing the power of the mind to heal through the scientific method. It's a remarkable shift, moving from just dismissing it to rigorously testing it.
And the scientific case for distant healing, it's surprisingly robust, built on quite a few studies.
It is. Daniel J. Benor, a psychiatrist, did a comprehensive review back in 1993. He looked at over 150 controlled studies.
150, wow, what
Yeah.
did they study?
All sorts of living organisms, enzymes, cell cultures, bacteria, yeasts, plants, animals, and of course humans. He meticulously analyzed them.
And what did he find?
He found that more than half of these studies showed significant, statistically verifiable healing effects.
More than half, across all those different life forms.
Yes. It suggests this isn't just about human psychology. It might be a more fundamental influence of focused intention on biological systems.
But maybe the most talked about study, the one that really made waves, was the one focused on AIDS patients, especially given the time it was done.
That's the important study by Fred Sisher, Elizabeth Russell Targ's daughter, by the way, and their associates. It was published in the Western Medical Journal in 1998.
What made it so groundbreaking?
Its design, mainly, and the population it addressed. It used a rigorous, randomized, double-blind methodology. That's the gold standard for clinical trials, as you know.
Right, eliminates bias. Neither the patients nor the researchers know who's getting the treatment.
Exactly. And crucially, the healers themselves were also blinded. They never met the patients, didn't know their identities, just focused their intention remotely.
So how did it work?
It involved a 10-week distant healing intervention for men with advanced AIDS in San Francisco. They had 40 experienced healers participate from a really diverse range of traditions: Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Native American, shamanic, plus secular bioenergetic schools.
A real mix of approaches.
Yes. Each patient in the healing group was treated remotely by 10 different healers on a rotating schedule. The instruction was basically to direct an intention of health and well-being for about an hour a day, for 6 days, all at a distance.
And the outcomes, were they significant?
They were truly dramatic. The odds were calculated at 100 to 1 against the results being just random chance.
Wow, what kind of outcomes?
The healing group showed significantly better medical and quality of life outcomes across multiple measures. Fewer outpatient doctor visits, 185 versus 260 in the control group.
That's a big difference.
Huge. And significantly fewer days of hospitalization, only 10 days compared to 68 days for the control group.
68 versus 10. That's staggering.
It really is. They also got fewer new illnesses during the study, 16 versus 43, and reported significantly less emotional distress. It's important to note, though, that while a pilot study had deaths in the control group, this main replication study happened when triple drug therapy became standard, so there were no deaths in either group.
Okay, so it wasn't about preventing death in this case, but improving health and quality of life significantly.
Exactly, which it clearly seemed to do. The impact was so clear that the journal editor, when introducing the paper, explicitly said they wanted to publish this provocative paper to stimulate other studies.
A direct call for more research from a mainstream medical journal. That's powerful.
And it wasn't an isolated finding either. 2 other large-scale double-blind studies, these ones on cardiac patients, were published in equally prestigious medical journals around that time.
Who did those?
Randolph C. Bird published one in the Southern Medical Journal in 1988 with 393 patients. And William Harris and colleagues published another in the Archives of Internal Medicine in 1999 with almost 1,000 patients, 990.
And they also found positive effects.
All 3 of these large clinical trials departed significantly from chance expectation, providing a really compelling body of evidence for the efficacy of distant healing, prayer, or intention.
It's hard to ignore that weight of evidence from well-designed studies. But Targ and Katra noted something interesting about the size of the effect, didn't they? Comparing the AIDS study to the cardiac ones.
They did. They noted that the Secker-Targ AIDS study seemed to achieve a greater effect size, a stronger positive result, even with fewer patients than the big cardiac studies.
Why did they think that was?
They attributed it to their deliberate choice of healers. They used healers who each had more than 5 years healing experience.
Ah, experienced practitioners.
Right. Whereas the other studies sometimes used well-intentioned volunteers, maybe people who prayed regularly but weren't necessarily experienced healers in the same sense.
So that raises a really important question, doesn't it? What does this imply about the role of skill or experience, maybe even the conscious cultivation of intention in these seemingly non-physical interactions?
Exactly. Is distant healing or influencing things with intention an innate ability that can actually be honed? Like a muscle you can strengthen through practice and dedication?
The evidence certainly seems to point towards practice making a real
That
difference.
does seem that way.
Okay, so we've looked at remote viewing, distant influence, precognition,
Yeah.
distant healing, all backed by some surprising science. But what ties it all together? What's the common thread, and what does it mean for us personally?
It seems to keep coming back to this idea of the quiet mind.
Precisely. For millennia, spiritual teachers across basically all cultures have described quieting the mind, getting beyond that constant internal chatter, as a universal path, a path to health, happiness, and peace of mind. And importantly, they often emphasize that this path transcends needing to follow a specific religion or dogma. Right?
Absolutely. It's experiential. They suggested that as you learn to quiet the mind, you are likely to encounter these psychic-seeming experiences. But crucially, remember Patanjali's warning.
Right, don't get attached.
Don't get attached to these psychic abilities. See them as mere phenomena standing as stumbling blocks on the path to enlightenment.
So the abilities themselves aren't the main goal. The quiet mind that allows them, that's the real prize. It allows a deeper kind of self-awareness to emerge.
Exactly. Targ and Katra describe the quiet mind as the space that resides between the inflow of information, that's your psychic perception, and the outflow of intention, that's distant healing or influence.
It's the ground zero between receiving and sending, in a way.
Kind of. It's within this stillness, this profound inner silence, that true self-awareness can arise. Not the ego self, but a deeper, more expansive understanding of who we fundamentally are. This perspective shifts the focus from just having cool powers to understanding a fundamental aspect of consciousness that, when accessed, reveals our deep interconnectedness.
Which brings us to this idea they mentioned of accessing a psychic internet. It's a very modern, very relatable metaphor.
It really is. The author suggests that we are actually already hooked up to the psychic internet. They equate it to what Carl Jung famously called the collective unconscious.
We're all online already, basically.
Pretty much. But the users, they clarify, aren't just anybody. They are primarily those who have learned to stop their thoughts and rest their attention.
So quieting the mind is like logging on, or maybe getting a better signal.
That's a good analogy. By quieting the mind, we are, in essence, tuning in to access and affect the exchange of information that's constantly flowing within this vast non-local network of consciousness. It's not about acquiring some brand new ability. It's about learning to consciously use an inherent one.
So what does this all mean for our understanding of reality, then? It suggests our consciousness isn't really limited by space or time as we normally perceive them.
Right. Instead, it can find a mental path of zero distance to seemingly distant locations operating within that non-local spider web of space and time we talked about.
This idea that both the future and the past are constantly tugging on the present, it really does challenge our linear view of existence. It implies a much more dynamic, interconnected reality playing out.
And this leads to another really profound implication, that maybe spirituality itself can be approached not just as a matter of faith, but as a testable hypothesis.
Testable spirituality.
Targ and Katra advocate for what they call a comprehensible spirituality, one that emphasizes direct experience over just accepting religious beliefs or dogma. The experience of God, they assert, is a testable hypothesis.
That's a bold statement. It sort of removes it from pure faith and puts it into the realm of personal experimentation.
Exactly. It's a significant departure from many traditional religious frameworks, inviting empirical exploration of our own inner states.
It reminds me a bit of Albert Einstein, actually, in his 1939 essay, Science and Religion. He suggested that while objective knowledge gives us tools, the ultimate goal itself and the longing to reach it must come from another source than just analytical thought. There's a yearning there that science alone can't quite satisfy.
That fits perfectly.
Yeah.
And Herbert Benson's concept of being hardwired for God also resonates here. He meant that throughout millennia from Buddha, Jesus, the Baal Shem Tov, poets like Rumi mystics have shared these strikingly common experiences. Experiences that perhaps are actually available to all of us.
Like Rumi saying, my soul is from elsewhere, I'm sure of that, and I intend to end up there. It speaks to that innate longing for connection beyond just the physical.
And this oceanic connection, this overpowering feeling of love or unbounded, interconnected consciousness that people report experiencing through a quiet mind. Targ and Katra describe that as an experience of God.
Which gives new meaning to that phrase, God is love. It's not an abstract concept, but a felt reality accessible through inner stillness.
These are the compelling feelings of oneness that mystics have urged us to explore for centuries, really. Jesus called this state the peace that passes all understanding, maybe a kingdom which is not of this world.
And Hindus call it bliss or ananda.
Right, and Buddha called it a state of no mind, signifying the absence of those thoughts that disrupt our awareness of an underlying unity. They're all different descriptions, different pointers towards the same core inner experience, a universal human capacity.
And this experiential approach, it even started to sway some hardcore philosophers, didn't it?
Yeah, even in the philosophical world, there was a shift. 20th century logicians like Ludwig Wittgenstein and Alfred Ayer, they started out as logical positivists, very skeptical about unverifiable statements about God.
Right, if you can't measure it, you can't meaningfully talk about it.
Exactly. But by the end of their lives, they were apparently willing to consider mystical experiences as potential data, as something observable in an experiment, even if the experiment was internal. Wittgenstein famously said, "The solution to the riddle of life in space and time lies outside space and time."
Wow, that's a huge admission from someone dedicated to rigorous logic.
It is, and this recognition that inner experience can be a valid form of inquiry is further supported by the philosopher Ken Wilber. He talks about 3 eyes of empiricism.
Eyes.
Yeah. The eye of the flesh, which perceives the physical world through our senses. The eye of the mind, which grants access to logic, math, ideas. And the eye of contemplation, our window to spiritual experience.
So different ways of knowing, each valid in its own domain.
Wilber asserts that spiritual realms can be explored scientifically, in a sense, using the appropriate eye, not just through blind faith or dogma, but through disciplined inner observation.
So it's not about just believing blindly, but an empirical, personal approach to spirituality.
Yeah.
It's really an invitation, isn't it, to test these ideas for yourself.
Exactly. The empirical approach to spirituality, as Targ and Kocher present it, is disarmingly simple. Basically, sit down and be quiet, and then examine your experience against the teachings of these ancient traditions. See if they match up for you.
It's like a scientific experiment conducted within your own consciousness.
Pretty much. Think of Ramana Maharshi's famous self-inquiry method, asking who is aware, or who wants to know. It guides you to turn attention inward, to the very source of awareness itself, which he claimed would lead directly to that quiet mind.
So ultimately, this deep dive seems to show us that the direction of our attention is the most powerful tool we have to transform our lives.
It affects not only our own perceptions and experiences, but also, astonishingly, the experiences and maybe even the behaviors of others. The scientific and spiritual implications here are just immense. They're evident in the continually unfolding mystery of the space-time we live in.
And that quiet mind offers the opportunity for experiencing what love, connection.
Experiencing itself, perhaps, as love that is timeless, eternal, and completely unseparated by our physical bodies.
So what does this all mean for us, really? Taking all this in, this deep dive into Targ and Katra's work, the broader research on psychic abilities, non-locality. It truly challenges our fundamental understanding of reality, doesn't it? Our minds, our interconnectedness.
It really does. It kind of makes you wake up each morning and wonder, considering the possibility that our expanded awareness isn't actually limited by time or space.
Whether you come at this from, purely scientific curiosity, wanting to understand the edges of physics and biology, or maybe from a spiritual quest for deeper meaning,
the evidence strongly suggests there is indeed more to us than skin and bones. We seem to live in a profoundly interconnected world.
And the power of our quiet mind, our directed attention, might be far, far greater than we ever imagined.
It offers a path, really, to understanding ourselves and the universe that moves beyond either strict materialism on one hand or just blind faith on the other. It invites direct, experiential exploration.
Which raises a really important question for you, our listener. If our thoughts truly can affect others, and if separation is, at some level, an illusion, how might that change the way you approach your daily interactions, your relationships, even your own pursuit of inner peace?
Yeah, how would you live differently if you truly embodied this profound interconnectedness? Think about the ripple effect of your conscious attention, your intention.
If the universe truly is this non-local spider web, as the research suggests,
then maybe every thought, every intention resonates through it, potentially touching lives in ways we're only just beginning to comprehend.
Thank you for joining us on this mind-expanding deep dive on Medium Rare. Keep those questions coming, keep exploring.
And remember, the universe is full of mysteries.
And the greatest ones might just reside within ourselves. Until next time.